everybody, OSB back at you again, this time to act as your medical guide through the misinformation issue that we have in girl world, especially on the side where ALR seems to live. So, we've all heard a lot of mention of lymphedema and lipedema on her part lately. But for some reason, she seems to fail to be consistent in acknowledging the fact that lymphedema and lipedema is 100% manageable. So, let's break it down, shall we? A lot of people are not overly familiar with the lymphatic system, but it does carry a rather integral part of how our body functions. The lymphatic system is almost similarly designed to the cardiovascular system. Now, while it does carry some of the same sort of functions as it does deal with circulation, it is not the same. With the lymphatic system specifically, it carries a finer, thin, colorless lymph fluid that actually specifically deals with infection and white blood cells. Now, there are multiple parts to the lymphatic system. There are two organs, the spleen and the thymus, that are part of that particular system. However, with lymphedema, it is fairly limited to the lymph vessels and the lymph nodes. For Amber, specifically in the lower extremities. Now, contributing factors generally are usually as follows: old age, excessive obesity, or rheumatoid or psoriatic arthritis. Which one of those sounds familiar? Using Amber specifically as our representative of the lymphedema, Amber exhibits what is called OIL, obesity-induced lymphedema, which is associated with people who have a BMI of 30 plus and is incredibly high at people who have a BMI of 40 plus. This being secondary to a compression of the lymph vessels or lymph nodes by increased weight around them, causing a partial or complete obstruction. Now, as much as we love to hear that Amber associates her inability to complete physical activity or to lose weight simply because of her lymphedema or lipedema, which I will cover further on, it is absolutely untrue. Management of lymphedema specifically is done through several methods, one of which is diet and exercise. A low-fat diet, increased exercise, use of compression devices such as compression socks or compressive mechanic devices that compress from the lower extremity up into higher in the extremity, or manual compressive therapy, which can actually be done by the individual themselves or a caregiver, or physical therapy, can actually reduce the likelihood of a secondary issue from lymphedema. Now, real quickly, just touching on complications of lymphedema that is left unmanaged, the main one would be cellulitis. We've heard Amber mention that many times, that she has chronic recurring cellulitis. A large part of that is probably due to the lymphedema that she has left unchecked. Ideally, any diet or exercise system and related to anything health-based is going to be fairly similar. You're going to want to stay away from processed foods. You're going to want to stay away from things high in fat, high in salt, and you're going to want to stick to lean meats, lots of fruits and veggies, and you're going to want to maintain an adequate hydration level. All of those things play a part in managing lymphedema. The main reason why is with inadequate protein, the connective tissues can weaken, and that can actually negatively impact lymphedema. Now, in relation to exercise, obviously, Amber utilizing this as a reasoning behind why she can't get up and be active is actually her being counterproductive to the issue. Mainly because with movement, the musculature contracts and releases as we move. Obviously, that's the way muscles work. Take my arm as an example. When I straighten my arm out, this muscle back here contracts, this one releases. When I bend it, This one contracts, this one releases. It is that way with every part of our bodies generally that have anything to do with musculoskeletal movement. Now, if you can imagine with the leg, you have musculature on the front and back of the leg that with movement contract and release and contract and release, and it is the same way. Now, with this particular issue, lymphedema specifically, with that contract and release back and forth of the muscles in the legs, what can happen is that it can actually help the lymphatic fluid to travel, which is why, despite discomfort, it is still entirely possible to get up, to be active. It just requires a little bit more work. I wanted to throw in too that there is a caveat that of course gravity does happen to play a role in lymphedema and the travel of fluids that may pool in the lower extremities. This is the reason why we hear Amber mention that lymphedema flaring whenever she sits for long periods in the car. Anyone who's familiar with working on their feet for long hours do have a tendency to notice that when they come home and take off their socks, that, there is a little bit of puffiness in the ankles and in the feet, etc. And that is simply because it does require a little bit more effort on the part of the body to push fluid back from the extremities to the body itself. But that's where the secondary assistance can actually come into play. So, now that I have covered lymphedema, I have opted actually to separate lipedema into an entirely separate video. Mind you, management of lipedema and lymphedema are not terribly different, but there are nuances to lipedema that are not applicable to lymphedema, and for that I feel it requires a little bit further analysis in a separate instance. Whether it be lymphedema or lipedema, the symptoms should not be ignored or downplayed, and management of them should be established immediately and upheld from that point forward, as they are both progressive diseases and can cause further long-term complications. I hope this has kind of helped you guys understand the difference between the information that's being provided to you on ALR's channel versus actual written treatment documentation that is implemented by the medical personnel across the country. I just didn't want there really to be any nuances or blurred lines on things. So that's what I've got. I'm going to catch up with you guys later. Hope you have a good day. Bye, y'all.